As we were choosing the best of with my team, this one particular episode actually did not air long ago, but I just have not been able to stop talking about it. This particular guest absolutely opened my eyes in ways that I had not ever opened. I love the fact that all my guests educate me and they educate our viewers and our listeners. But I will tell you, Mindy Henderson, wow, I am so lucky that I get to call her my friend. She actually aired in June of 28. And you want to talk about an amazing human. Listen up. I'm telling you, one, get the tissue boxes. Number two, please get her book. But number three, I'd love to hear your comments about what you thought about this episode, because for me, it was so moving. So enjoy this particular best of. Here we are, another episode of Fostering Change. I have been so lucky this year. I've been lucky to really read some incredible books. I have met some amazing humans. And I have been able to let each and every one of you, whether you're listening to it on our podcast platforms, or maybe you're watching this on our YouTube channel, but to hear some incredible stories. I always say this, that you never know who you're going to inspire by listening to their story. My next guest, I actually was doing some research on her, and I was just so impressed. And by the way, there's something that she's going to be surprised about when I bring her on. But first, I want to talk about a little bit about Mindy Henderson. Mindy is actually the editor-in-chief of the Muscular Dystrophy Association family of Quest content, including the magazine, the newsletter, the blog. She also has a podcast. She is an author, an editor, a speaker, an advocate, and I could go on and on and on, which will. But Mindy, welcome to Fostering Change.
Oh, what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much for having me.
So you know what, Mindy, I have to tell you something. When I first started doing some research about having you on Fostering Change, I didn't know you were in a wheelchair.
Okay, interesting.
So I
Surprise.
had not gotten to that part of the story. I had not really, it just wasn't anything. And I understand MS. I have family members that have MS. I understand muscular dystrophy. I grew up in the era where Jerry Lewis was the thing that we always watched.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I was uneducated about it. It's just the way that you had come across. And then I watched a video of you. And you talked about how people say they do not know how to react when people are in a wheelchair.
Right.
And you talk about that in your book. By the way, guys, you got to hear this title of this book. This is a win-all, catch-all. The truth about things that suck. That's exactly right. So, Mindy, tell me about this book.
Oh my gosh, this book is 12 years in the making. Actually, probably longer than that. I started writing when I was a kid, but really started seriously working on working toward getting published about 12 years ago. And I always knew that I wanted to write a book about, sort of helping people navigate adversity. And so, it evolved, and changed a couple of times, the concept of the book, a few times over the course of 12 years. And, eventually this was the book that came out of me. And, I really wanted to very bluntly be able to recognize that adversity is real and we all have problems and we all have struggles. And what I really wanted to do was make sure that anyone who picked this book up could find themselves somewhere in it, because not everyone can relate to being a disabled person, but everyone can relate to, loneliness and rejection and job loss and shame and body image and all of those other universal things that we all kind of struggle with, or so many of us struggle with in life. And so each chapter of the book is one of those themes. And I talk about how those things really manifested in my life and the lens that I really learned to look at them through to be successful in navigating them.
Well, we're actually recording this, and on the recording date is today is your publishing day. By the
Yes.
way, congratulations. I know
Thank
how exciting
you.
that is as someone who also has written a book, but I want to dive right in because I have really been trying to help change the vocabulary of people throughout our country. And I don't consider you a disabled person. I
Mm.
consider you a person who actually is experiencing something that is causing you not to be able to walk. Okay. So, how
Mhm.
would you prefer people to address that?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and I get this question a lot. It can, even within the community of people with disabilities, it can be kind of polarizing, and everyone kind of has their own preferences about it. But I think what I've learned is that it's never wrong to sort of take a people first approach. And so, being a person with a disability rather than a disabled person, it's less defining, I think, and that usually, that works for me, and I find that it usually goes over pretty well with others.
You know what, Mindy? I feel the exact same way. My children, all five of my kids, including myself, we grew up in the foster care system. And there
Mm.
is something that absolutely hurts my heart when I hear people say, oh, those are foster children. And I think to myself, the very first thing you think about is the word foster. And foster, in my opinion, is what did they do to get there? What did they do? When
Yeah.
actually we need to call them children in foster care, just like having you as a person, looking at you as a person and not looking at you as a disabled person, but a person who's experiencing a disability,
Right.
and I think that it's up to us. And I think we're all leaders, but I think it's up to us to correct people, to really get them to understand, hey, you and I both probably remember when we used to call them homeless people, but now we no
Yeah.
longer do that. And we call them people who are experiencing homelessness. One of the things we talked about before we jumped on is we talked about the fact that you are a mom and that you are a mom. And I will tell you, I think a lot of people who throughout our country, and I love the fact that your book is so frank. I am one of these people. People don't tell you there's no filter with me. And so, but at the same time, I do not mean any harm when I say, but there's just no filter. I want people to talk. I want people
Yeah.
to be truthful about what sucks. And so what I'd
Mhm.
like to ask as a mom, and a mom who is experiencing a disability, it had to be tough.
Yeah, it would there were we were thoughtful about the experience that we wanted and the experience we wanted to give a child. And I have limitations that come with my physical disability. And so for that reason, we decided to adopt an older child. She was about 5 when we adopted her, just because the care of a baby or an infant is so physical. And there are people out there who do it, and they're my heroes. But for us, it felt right to adopt an older child. And so by the time she came to join our family, there wasn't a ton of physical care that she still needed, but obviously a lot of emotional and psychological care, and all of kind of, honestly, kind of the fun part that you get to in parenting. But when they get a little bit older and they start to emerge as these little human beings. And so I think that, honestly, there were times when my disability was a plus. It was an opportunity for me to talk to her about being different, because there were times when she came to us and we adopted her from China, and she didn't look like my husband and me, and oftentimes didn't look like the kids she went to school with. And that's, I mean, the kiss of death when you're in school is to be different. And there were times when she would come home and talk to us about this, and I was able to, I think, relate to her in a way that was so special to me, because I could ask her things like, I could say, Grace, do you think that because I'm in a wheelchair, I'm any less cool than any of your other friends' moms, or anyone else that you interact with? And she would say, well, no. And I could sort of teach her. I tried to really teach her from an early age that it's our differences that make us cool and make us special. And I hope, I think that that's something that she grew up believing about herself.
Wow. Mindy, I absolutely love you because
Oh,
that is exactly how my husband and I talk to our children. Because as you
yeah.
can see on my back wall, not all of our kids look like us.
Uh-huh.
We are very different. And it's very, all of a sudden you're a kid who goes into a school, a kid of color, and you have two white parents and same sex parents at that.
Mhm.
There's so much, and we know how mean kids can be. And,
Yeah.
and I love how you just said, that you said to your daughter Grace, am I any less cool because I'm in a wheelchair? And I
Mhm.
actually have said that to one of my kids. Do you find that your daddy's any less cool because I'm white and I'm
Mhm.
married to so I love that. We are so on the same page.
Oh, I love it.
The thing that I think that you have probably dealt with that most people will not deal with within their life. I do not deal with it as a father of four children of color. I know what's out there. I understand the fact that I as people look at me as this white privileged male, there is discrimination. And there are so many levels of discrimination.
Mhm.
And there are so many levels of discrimination that a lot of times I feel people don't talk about it because they
Yeah.
feel like, well, maybe I've done that, or maybe I'm a part of that. Um, I would love to know, because one of the things that I read about you is that you truly do not consider yourself a victim. And I'd like to talk about that when it comes to discrimination.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. It's a chapter in my book. I actually wrote about discrimination, and as again a person with a disability, there are a variety of times when I've felt that, and it's kind of a slippery slope because I think there's a difference between discrimination and maybe being uneducated or unexposed to something. And I've had a lot of experiences in my life where the people I'm interacting with simply have never known a person in a wheelchair. And I understand, I really truly do. I understand that if it's something that you've never been exposed to, it can be a little uncomfortable and you can maybe not quite know how to navigate it. But I'm very firm on the fact that we have to give ourselves the chance for things to get comfortable with things and for things to become more normal. And so when you come across something that is a little bit different, you've got to give yourself the space to experience it and live it and understand it, and for it to become kind of normalized in your world. Now, there are other times in the world of employment and, even in the world of just being out and about and, having people speak over my head to the people who are with me, thinking that maybe I can't communicate or can't answer a question or things like that. And it can even be as subtle as maybe allowing your child to stare at someone using a wheelchair rather than telling them to just say hello, And so there's so many ways that this shows up in our world. But what I believe very, very firmly, and, I am living my journey and I'm trying to set the best example that I can. It's up to every individual person how they're going to respond to any discrimination that they may face in this world. But the way that I choose to face it is with kindness and grace, because I believe that, hate and what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I believe that hate begets more hate, and so
Right.
I would never and have never really responded to someone who's treated me in a certain way or maybe discriminated against me in kind of a shaming or hateful way, because that's not the person I want to be in this world. Even if that's not how they've treated me, I would know that I am a kind, open-hearted, gracious person. And that's the person that I want to show up as in this world. So even in the face of something as, kind of ugly as discrimination, that's the treatment that someone is going to get from me. And I'm not going to let them victimize me and cause me to stoop to the level of then shaming or being hateful with them, because that's not who I am. And so, yeah, so that's how I choose to approach those situations.
I love that. I love that. Kill them with kindness. Kill them with
Yeah.
kindness. I know that a very, very famous woman said, when they go low, we go higher.
Yes, I love that
And
quote.
so I love that quote. It is a quote that I truly, truly try to live by. The fact is, though, well, we have it out there. Discrimination is out there. And for some reason, I think so many times it's how the other person is feeling that they want to project on that person. And you made a comment and talked about that child that stares and the parent that doesn't say, walk up and say hi. I truly do think that we have got to become a society that we should have been already, that it is okay to ask questions.
Yes.
It is okay to I feel that as children we tend to shun them when they start to look at someone that might not look like them, or might be in a wheelchair, or maybe they have walkers, or maybe they've had an accident that they are not able to see, or so. I feel that we have to start allowing children to ask the question, to be able to go and approach the person, because that is the only way they're going to realize that, guess what, that's a person.
Yeah. Well, and children are so beautiful, because they're so impressionable. And honestly, it's the perfect time to have a good impact and allow them to have a good interaction with someone that's different from them. Now, as a parent, you don't always know if the person is going to respond favorably to their child's question, but hopefully they will. And I think most of the people I know certainly would. And a perfect example is I had a little girl, she was probably 6, come up to me one day in Target, I think it was. And she came up kind of shyly and asked me if I take my wheelchair home at night. And I told her that I did, and we talked for a minute, and then 2 seconds later she was telling me about a video game that she had played and asked me if I like to play video games. So it ended up being a positive interaction for her, and hopefully it made enough of an impression on her that when she sees the next person in a wheelchair, she's going to know that it's normal, and yep, they go home at night just like she does, and all of that. And yeah, I hope that stuck with her.
Yeah, I really do believe that we need to start opening that floodgate, allowing children to have that interaction, because you and I both know empathy is something that we're not born with. It's something taught, and there's never a better time when a child is young when to show them that even what they might see visually is different, we are all still the same in so many ways. There's been so many changes throughout our country when it comes to people who have a disability and that are living with a disability. And one of the changes that I know recently happened is my friends over at Sesame Street, for the very first time, is actually have a Muppet that is actually in a wheelchair.
Yes.
I am very lucky that I actually have sat on the advisory board with Sesame Street when we brought in the very first Muppet in foster care. And now that I see that they've now brought in a Muppet that is actually in a wheelchair, how did that make you feel?
Well, first of all, I drove my sister bananas with Sesame Street when I was a kid. I loved it so much. I would watch it like 3 times a day. And so it's a show that had a big impact on me, and seeing them, make that move toward inclusion was so meaningful, because honestly, I think that the community of individuals living with disabilities is still one of the most underrepresented groups in our country. And honestly, the media, television, movies, magazines, all of those things, it's still relatively rare to see a person with a disability or in a wheelchair. And when you grow up not seeing people that look like you start to wonder if there's a reason why, if maybe that's not okay. And so seeing that Sesame Street added this character and is showing children who are watching their show that this is cool and fine and, part of our world, I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And again, Icebreaker, Sesame Street,
Yes.
it's truly, because you are exactly right. For me as a gay man, growing up and never seeing anyone on TV that was, and again, I can't compare that anything like, being in a wheelchair or my children who are of color. But, for me, this is, as you said, it's everybody's own individual journey. And for me, it was my journey as a gay man, not seeing any representation of me, and it made you think that, oh, what did somebody make me wrong, or
is this not okay?
Yeah, and I love that. One of the things, Mindy, is, and I've noticed this, and by the way, I have to give you kudos again on this. I have always thought that I was a person who really looked out and looked at everything. But since the moment that I knew that you were going to be on my podcast, is when I really started diving into muscular dystrophy and all of that. But what I was really surprised about is all of a sudden I had this notification in my mind where I'm going to restaurants, I'm going to hotels, I'm going to stores, and I'm seeing that even in 2022, that we still have not made it accessible where it's accessible for me, but it is absolutely work. And by the way, this is the part that I think sucks. For you to do the same exact things I get to do.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I say it all the time. I mean, you nailed it. In 2022, we should be doing better. It's a very strange thing to live in a world that still really is not designed for you. And there are issues with architecture and buildings that I go to, and public transportation, and don't get me started on air travel, to not be able to drive a wheelchair onto an airplane and be comfortable and feel safe like everyone else on the plane is crazy to me. Even the world of fashion and style, there's room for improvement and areas where we could make clothing and accessories and shoes and all of these things more universally useful to all of us. And so it's something that I talk a lot about. I see progress, but there's still so much more work to do. And I had an experience a couple of weeks ago where I was traveling for work and I needed a hotel room. And I have a very specific sort of accessibility need that I have from a room that's not unique really to anyone who uses a wheelchair. But it's something that the ADA doesn't necessarily reinforce. The ADA is a beautiful thing, but there's still a lot of subjectivity that goes into it. And I, in 2022, had a very hard time finding a hotel room, a hotel that I could stay in. So you're right. And I think that it's going to be up to all of us to listen to these short stories and share our stories for progress to happen.
And I do think that progress can happen.
Yes.
The thing is that we need more people to talk about it. We need more people to feel that, maybe it is uncomfortable for you to talk about it, but guess what? This is reality. And I say this quite often. If your table is not big enough for all of us to sit at it, build a bigger table.
Yes.
Build a bigger table, because I'm a person who I travel as a public speaker like every month. I mean, we were laughing in the month of May. I think I was home for 72 hours. I told
no.
But the thing is, I walk onto an airplane. I
Yeah.
walk onto an airplane and I sit down and there is no question. And all of a sudden I find out about you and I start as I'm sitting there in my seat, this is literally just last week. I was flying back from
Yeah.
London. I was preparing for this interview with you and I'm sitting there in my seat and I'm thinking to myself, what would Mindy do?
Yeah.
What would Mindy do in this, 8-hour flight from London where she doesn't have, the capability of having her wheelchair? She is, you want to talk about not accessible bathrooms.
Right. Oh, yeah.
What have we done as a society not to think about each individual person?
Yeah. And, and it's interesting because that statement alone, there are so many varieties of individual people that it's hard. It is a hard problem to solve, to make everything accessible to everyone. But one of the things I say in my book is that hard does not equal impossible. It's going to require some effort and some work on the part of the people who are in a position to make these changes, but it's time.
Yes, it
And I
is
have so
time.
many friends who say the same thing to me. Once they get to know me, they look at the world a different way and they start to notice things that would be a problem for me if I were with them.
Yeah, you know what? I hope that each and every one of our viewers and our watchers walk away with the same feeling that I have. Mindy, I have a last question for you.
Yes.
What do you hope people get out of your book?
It's been a hard couple of years for the world, honestly. And there's been so much chaos and so much tragedy. And I think that what the world needs right now is hope. I think that they need a more hopeful way of looking at things. And I think that what I really want people to get from this book is that hope. I think I want them to get a newfound encouragement and empowerment to look at the world through a different lens, because we've all been victims in the last couple of years, but it's time to stop living like victims and to start empowering ourselves to move forward and to see possibilities instead of limitations, and hopefully for people to go and climb their mountain, whatever that mountain looks like.
Wow, I love that. Did you hear that, everybody? Climb that mountain. The fact is, as I say this all the time, when it comes to kids who are in foster care, don't blame the system. Help me change the system. You know
Yes.
what? The fact is this is not a blame game. It's time to change. And what I truly do hope, Mindy, and I hope as our listeners and our viewers, is that, again, as I said earlier, I hope you get out of this what I got out of it, because I'm 55 years old and I am so absolutely humbled that I actually have you in my life, because you have made me look at things differently that I never thought of. And that to me is a takeaway as a human that I have always dreamed of when I interview people, when I research people, is the fact that, what is my takeaway? And my takeaway is the fact that we need to step up and we need to do better. And the fact is what Mindy said, it's, hard stuff, you better believe it's hard, but it's possible. Listen, everybody, this is an amazing another conversation. I love to tell you, this is definitely in my top ones for 2022, Mindy. You have
Oh,
energized me. You have made my heart smile. And I am so, so lucky that you chose to be on Fostering Change. Listen, everyone, I'm going to have the link for her book. It will be there. Please, please do me a favor. Go grab a copy, read her book. The fact is, it's about some things that suck, and that is so true. And it's so true for all of us on so many different levels. This is another amazing episode of Fostering Change. And remember, each and every one of you, you have an opportunity. And the opportunity today is to be a good human. Take care. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for listening or watching the latest episode of Fostering Change. All of us on our team hope that you've learned something new today and have been inspired to be a good human. Now, just a reminder that you can always find Fostering Change on your favorite channels on Google, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and others, including, of course, comfortcases.org. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for joining us each and every week. And a reminder that if you have a suggestion for a guest, or maybe you might have a question about today's podcast, or are interested in becoming a sponsor of Fostering Change, please don't hesitate to email me personally at fosteringchange@comfortcases.org. Now, that's it for now. Thanks again, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.